Welcome. This is going to be the first in a series of 10 videos talking about how to answer a P3 business analysis exam standard question and breaking it down into 10 easy pieces so that you don't get overwhelmed by all the things that you have to do. My name is David Laws. I am the London School of Business and Finance lecturer for ACCA P3. Not only do I teach the paper, but also I am one of the marking team, so some of the things that we will go through in the 10 easy steps are things that I have noticed with students in the actual exam. Some of them are good things, and I will tell you about them, and some of them are mistakes that students make in the exam, and I'll tell you how to make sure you don't make the same mistakes. The exam question that we are going to work our way through over these 10 sessions is EcoCar, which is question 1 from the June 2011 exam, and I would suggest that you download that from the ACCA's website. It's probably a good idea to have a copy of it with you as we work our way through. So, the 10 steps that we are going to go through, we're going to look at the question approach, how long you should spend, what the words mean in step 3, the narrative, the things that the examiner tells you, and then in steps 5 and 6, what you do with that narrative. Step 7 will be about the professional marks that you usually get in question 1 of the P3 exam. Step 8 will be about looking at the numbers. Step 9, very important in question 1, putting together the ideas that we've had in part A with the ideas in part B. And finally, step 10, making a decision. So we will go through the 10 steps, looking at each little bit at a time. Working our way through an exam question, step 1 is how do we approach the question? In this step, we are simply looking at what does the examiner want us to do. Now, in the EcoCar question, June 2011 question 1, the question approach we're going to look at is let's see what the examiner actually asks us to do. So, in part A, we are told that Universal Motors, it turns out that they have purchased a company called EcoCar. They are now the owners of it. They have recognised the need to analyse the external environment. And part A simply says, please would you analyse the external environment. Part B, Universal Motors is considering doing some outsourcing, and we have to evaluate the financial and non-financial advantages and disadvantages, the case for and against, whether we think that this is a good idea. And finally, in part C, we have got some weaknesses. They are listed for us: lack of control, research and development, understanding of risk, and the examiner simply says, what could you do about those? Now, the key thing to remember in step 1, look at how practical this is going to be. You're going to find an awful lot of the answers to part A and part B and part C. A lot of them are going to be in the narrative. They're going to be in the text. What you're going to be asked to do is to comment on what you are finding. So, the requirement is what drives the question, and you must look at it first. When you are doing the P3 exam, the first thing that you look at is the requirement before you read anything else. Many students read through all the text, then get to the requirement. The trouble is they don't know what they're looking for in the text because they don't know what they're going to be asked to do. So you always read the requirement first of all. There is usually going to be some kind of story that's going on in the P3 requirement. In this one, you can see analyse the outside world, and then in part B, they are thinking about doing some outsourcing. Now, why would you do outsourcing? What kind of reasons might you have? Well, maybe it is difficult to get labour in the country you're operating in, so you're going to try and outsource and get it from somewhere else. Maybe you are worried about costs, and so you're going to try and outsource to get something produced more cheaply. Maybe you can't physically grow anymore. Maybe your factory is so large, or it's being worked so hard that you can't manufacture anything else, so you're looking to outsource. I suspect that there'll be some kind of link between what's going on in Part A, the outside world, and what they're deciding to do, which is looking at outsourcing. That's a very common theme in P3. What theories could you use to help you to answer the question? Well, it says in Part A, analyse the macro environment. What models would we use to do that? And I would hope that you would come up with PESTLE. It says the industry environment, and what models would we use to look at that? And I hope you would say the 5 forces model. So the requirements are starting to even give us ideas about what models we are supposed to be using. So in step 1, the first thing we need to think about then when we're looking at the requirements, is the company doing well or poorly? The story in this question isn't particularly clear. They might be outsourcing because they're doing poorly and costs are out of control. They might be outsourcing because they're doing really well and they want to expand quickly. At this point, we don't know. In some questions, it's much more obvious. The second thing that we have, identify what theories you're going to use. I'd be very surprised if we don't use PESTLE in Part A. I'd be very surprised if we don't use Porter's 5 forces in Part A.